Tonight on CTV News, a Christchurch preschool holds a media conference. We've got the latest over the measles scare. It's nearly time to have your say on the future of Christchurch, and freedom campers are back in the spotlight.
Broadcasting across Canterbury, from the CTV studio, this is First at 5.
Good evening. We begin tonight with a developing story. New Zealand infant formula is safe. That's the word from the Ministry for Primary Industries over the 1080 contamination scare. Police are on the hunt for a person who's threatened to poison baby food and formula products. Threats were made to Fonterra and Federated Farmers that the products would be poisoned if the use of 1080 pest control wasn't stopped. Anonymous letters were sent to both Federated Farmers and Fonterra last November, accompanied by a small packet of milk powder testing positive with the poison. The letter says the person or group would go public by the end of this month. Now, Deputy Director General Scott Gallagher says since the threats were made, they've upped security measures at milk plants and retail stores. He says they've also improved product testing, introducing tests for 1080. Mr Gallagher says they've tested more than 40,000 milk and dairy samples so far and haven't detected anything, but police are continuing to investigate this developing story. Well, Christchurch police have arrested a woman following two burglaries that occurred at lunchtime today in Merivale. Police say they found a large quantity of boxed jewellery, a camera and other personal items. Investigations are ongoing to identify the owners of these items. Meanwhile, a 49-year-old will appear in the Christchurch District Court on Wednesday, charged with burglary and possession of instruments for burglary and possession of instruments for drugs. Anyone in the Christchurch area who had any jewellery stolen or noticed it missing since January is urged to contact police. Well, the Christchurch Preschool says it's satisfied with its processes after a student was found to have measles. Last week, the 4-year-old Mozart's performing arts student was diagnosed with the infectious disease. The child had their first set of vaccinations, but not their second. The Canterbury District Health Board is still struggling to find the actual source of the child's measles. Here's Jared McCulloch.
We've had no more cases. That's good news from Dr. Daniel Williams from the Canterbury District Health Board. Last week, health officials were notified of a 4-year-old child affected by the disease and diagnosed late into the illness. The case has been classified as being mild, and children would usually get their jabs at 15 months and 4 years, but Dr. Williams says the child wasn't old enough to receive the second vaccination.
So this child had the vaccines that they should have had.
The Ministry of Health says 283 cases of the measles were detected in New Zealand over a 1-year period from December 2013, but none of those cases were in Canterbury. There's a higher chance of picking up the infectious diseases if you travel overseas to parts of the Philippines, China and India. But Williams says they are unsure of how the child has caught the measles and are continuing to find out.
In this case, that's not obvious, so we're going back and just talking to the parents of children who've been unwell, checking whether they have an illness that might be compatible with measles, and if there's a suspicion for a particular child, we'll ask for blood testing for that child.
The child attended 2 preschools, one of them being a St Albans kindergarten, and their managing director says they've been working closely with the CDHB.
We are responsible in situations like this for being able to supply information efficiently to the health department, and I'm glad to say that our student management system stood up to that and we were able to very quickly supply information to these people here. Canterbury District Health Board do an amazing job in acting very quickly to keep New Zealand children safe using the systems they have in place.
And she says parents have been pleased with the response from the preschool.
We've been able to move very quickly to reassure parents who naturally get concerned, and this has been effective.
Dr. Williams believes with the parents being notified quickly about the outbreak, they've been able to act fast to see if the disease has spread.
We've advised both parents and doctors that we've had a case of measles. We have had 2 more suspected cases that were notified to us, but both of the test results that came back on those cases were negative. And there have been no other confirmed cases of measles.
Symptoms of the measles include a fever, runny nose, cough, red eyes and sore throat, followed by a rash spreading throughout the body and is contagious through coughing and sneezing. The 4-year-old has recovered well and is able to be back in preschool. Jared McCulloch, CTV News.
Well, speaking of health, how healthy are you at work? Well, the health and safety is now the focus by WorkSafe. Over 30 work sites in the Christchurch rebuild will be visited over the next 2 weeks, giving workers free health checks.
Is the standard of health for rebuild workers up to scratch? About 400 workers across the Christchurch rebuild will receive free health checks and advice over the next 2 weeks. The initiative is a joint move by WorkSafe and the ACC to reduce on-site health risks. WorkSafe says while safety is usually in the spotlight, health is often ignored. It says 75 workers die at work every year, but up to 900 people die every year from work-related diseases. About 30 sites will be targeted over the next fortnight, with occupational health nurses giving health checks and advising on personal protective equipment, such as face masks and earplugs being fitted correctly.
4 years after it went bust, the former Christchurch bus company is taking Environment Canterbury to court. It claims the council is to blame for its collapse.
A former bus company says Environment Canterbury forced it into closing down and is now suing the council. ECAN is defending against claims at the High Court by Christchurch Bus Services. The company says ECAN made unlawful threats, forcing it to sell its bus fleet to a competitor in 2010. The company is now seeking damages from ECAN. The court heard 15 days into the contract, ECAN threatened to terminate it, so the company had no alternative but to sell its business to GoBus. ECAN Council says Christchurch Bus Services was a poorly performing company which was doomed to fail and was looking to blame others for that failure, having debt and a list of creditors. ECAN says the contract was tied to Christchurch Bus Services, securing 26 more buses from China, and says the company did not have the funding to buy them. The case is continuing at the High Court.
Freedom campers, yes, they're back in the headlines again. We all know they've been causing a headache for residents, particularly in New Brighton. So now the Christchurch City Council thinks it's come up with a solution. Boot them out to the red zone.
It's a growing problem in Christchurch, freedom campers making themselves at home throughout multiple parts of the city. But now there may be a solution on the horizon. The Christchurch City Council are looking into moving the makeshift camps to areas of the red zone, opening up parks and reserves for the campers to reside, and having toilet facilities left open at night for them to use. The number of freedom campers in the city has grown since the earthquakes, and it's made it difficult to control the increasing number of overseas tourists here in the country on working holidays. Earlier this year, the campers made the most of the Beresford Street car park in New Brighton, which caused a number of problems for residents in the area. The issue is to be put to the council this week with a report about the proposal. However, it's understood the report suggests a bylaw shouldn't be put in place until all other options have been put forth to solve the problem. Moving the campers will leave some residents with certainty, with the problems hopefully being fixed for the short term. The report will be discussed at a Christchurch City Council meeting this Thursday.
Well, still to come here on CTV News, we'll bring you an update on that 1080 scare and your local weather. And welcome back to CTV News. Well, a statement has just been released by the New Zealand Food and Grocery Council. Pretty compelling stuff too. They say they strongly condemn the criminal who has issued this blackmail threats to damage, I quote, our food supply. The council has absolute confidence in the safety of the New Zealand food supply. And I guess they're right when they really say that this is an attack on brand New Zealand. I mean, the minute this gets over to China, you can understand what's going to happen then. They say our country has had a reputation for producing safe and reliable quality food products which are in demand worldwide, and these cowards' letter does not change this at all. So very strong words from them. They say these the Food and Grocery New Zealand Council sends a message to parents, and that is clear, and I quote, "We are absolutely confident about the safety of infant formula manufacturing in New Zealand and the products sold in our supermarket shelves." They have some tips as well, basically saying continue to follow responsible food practices, always carefully examine packaging, and always check any anti-tampering devices such as seals. So some sound advice coming through from the New Zealand Food Council Safety. We'll bring you more on that story in tomorrow's bulletin. Well, how do you get to work? The chances are you probably drive a car, and believe it or not much has changed in 9 years.
It may not seem like it, but there are only marginally more cars driving to work than 9 years ago. Latest census results show 84% of all Christchurch commuters use a car to get to work, about 2% more than in 2009. But road congestion has become more dispersed post-quake, with now more drivers from townships in the Selwyn and Waimakariri districts. so the city's peripheral roads are now busier than in the CBD. But despite the emptier roads, 1 in 3 workers in the central city choose to walk or run to work instead. But there are more company cars on the road. 1 in 6 commuters now drive those, down from 1 in 8 drivers before. And there are more of these on the road from Selwyn and Waimakariri. 7% of workers cycle to work, the highest proportion in New Zealand, and this trend is growing. There are also more walkers and runners going to work than before. Probably unsurprisingly, with the ongoing detours around the city and changes to routes, bus use fell nearly 50% to only 3.1% of commuters using this form of transport.
And now it's time for your region's weather.
Let's get straight into it. Timaru, Temuka and Geraldine, you all shared a high of 24 today. Ashburton, you're on 22 degrees. Methven, slightly warmer on 23. Rakaia, 22, your high. Darfield, it was a nice 23 for you. Leeston and Rolleston, slightly cooler, sharing 22. Lincoln and Christchurch, your high was 22 also. Over in Akaroa now, it was a mild day for you, reaching a warm 22 degrees. Further up the region, Kaiapoi, Rangiora and Amberley, you all shared 23 today. Culverden, Hamner Springs and Cheviot, you took out the region's high with a warm 25. And Kaikoura, you hit 22. Let's take a look at tomorrow's weather now. Timaru, will be a cloudy Wednesday in store for you with some morning drizzle patches clearing and some light winds. Your low tonight is 12, tomorrow's high is 17. To Ashburton now, it'll be mostly cloudy and cool tomorrow with a few drizzle patches during the morning, but it should be dry by your afternoon. Tonight's low is 12, tomorrow's high 17 degrees. Taking a look at Christchurch now, there'll be some showers at first, but that will dry by late morning with some cool southerly breezes and just some low cloud. Your overnight low is 13, tomorrow's high is 16. Up in Kaikoura tomorrow, a cloudy Wednesday for you with just some morning drizzle patches clearing and some light southerly winds. Your low tonight is 12, tomorrow's high 17. Taking a look at the other areas around the region now, Temuka and Geraldine, there'll be showers at first, but the cloud will come through in the afternoon. Your high is 17. Methven, will be showers at first for you and then some cloud on 17. Rakaia, similar picture for you on 17. Darfield, Leeston, Rolleston and Lincoln, you all are sitting here on 17 degrees tomorrow. Over in Akaroa tomorrow, there will be a few light showers and then the cloud will appear in the afternoon. Slightly cooler for you though on 16 degrees. Kaiapoi, Rangiora and Amberley, a few showers at first, then some cloud in the afternoon, 17 degrees. Culverden, Hamner Springs and Cheviot, expect a few little light patches of rain in the morning, but then the cloud will appear later on a high of 17. Looking ahead for Canterbury now, it'll be mostly fine and sunny with just some breezy northeasterlies on Thursday. As for Friday, it'll be high cloud increasing during the day with just some mild temperatures and light northerly winds. There'll be some showers and cooler southwesterly winds later on in the evening. Taking a look at the weekend though, it'll be mostly cloudy on Saturday with just some southwesterlies dying out and then northeasterlies will develop. But it'll be mostly fine and sunny on Sunday with just some moderate northeasterly breezes. As for Monday, there'll be some cloud and a little bit of rain here and there and some light southerly winds. And that is your weather for Tuesday.
Stay with us here on CTV News. We'll bring you more on the New Zealand infant formula 1080 scare. The good news is the Ministry for Primary Industries says it's safe. More shortly. Welcome back to CTV News. In this developing story, the good news is New Zealand infant formula is safe. Now, that's the word from the Ministry for Primary Industries over the 1080 contamination scare. Police are on the hunt for a person who's threatened to poison baby food and formula products. Threats were made to Fonterra and Federated Farmers that the products will be poisoned if the use of 1080 pest control wasn't stopped. Now, we understand the D-Day for that, so to speak, must be today, and that's why police and the government has gone public with this information. What we do know is that Fonterra in last November was sent a small packet of milk powder testing positive with the poison. We'll bring you more on that story and how it will affect the local economy on tomorrow night's bulletin. We'll return our attention now to the 10-year plan. The council says it will release the 10-year plan for public submissions next week. What is going to be in this? What do you at home as a ratepayer need to carefully consider when reading this plan to make sure you have your say? Councillor Jana Johansson is with us tonight, and good evening to you.
Good evening, Chris.
Thank you for your time.
You're
so
welcome.
Give us a heads up. In your view, Jani, what should we be looking out for? What are the bits that we go, not in a million years?
Well, I think you have to look at the big picture, and obviously council recovering from an earthquake, we've got a huge financial challenge ahead. So the first point I want to make is that this is going to take a long time to recover as a city, and really what's important is people need to think about very strategically what we can afford to do now, what we can do and what we can do later. And really the trade-offs are around how much we borrow, how much rates go up, how much assets we sell if people want us to sell assets, and then of course what else can we not spend money on, e.g. save money by not borrowing as much and not spending as much. So the big picture, there's really four main things that people need to be aware of. I think fundamentally from a personal point of view, I think it's important that council does consult with its community. There's some big decisions ahead, and in particular, should we sell off our council companies? Should we sell off the things that raise money, that bring money in, that historically have kept rates at a lower level than they otherwise would be, for the short-term benefit of building, particularly in the central city, a huge number of expensive facilities and gold-plating the city's centre streets ahead of fixing up some of the broken streets in the suburbs?
The other issue, and I don't envy the position the council is currently in, because you have to make these decisions or at least release some kind of plan to the public, despite the fact you don't have the final review report on the horizontal infrastructure. You still don't have the final details of insurance costings and how much the council will get from that. So you're in a pretty difficult position. In a way, you're having to assume. Are you assuming the worst case scenarios? Are you assuming what? And how do you put a line in the sand that says, well, we don't really know how much money we've got to play with, so therefore we're going to have to assume this X amount of money?
It's incredibly difficult. There is a lot of uncertainty still, and we will work through that as a council. But I think in terms of what the public need to know is that we've made assumptions, and you can, as you read through the document, understand what some of those assumptions are. In terms of our infrastructure, the assumption that we have to make is that we will get zero from the Crown contribution. So we really have to look at where we spend our money. And if you take the transport, which I think is a really interesting issue, we've got some questions in there about how much we can afford to spend on cycleways. Yep. Also, there's about 263 million being proposed to be spent on central city traffic and the transport plan. So, you know, you need to contrast that with our infrastructure strategy, which talks about some of the broken streets in the suburbs.
What I don't understand though, and is that Minister Jerry Brownlee called into the program 2 weeks ago. Did you get a chance to listen to that in the end? Was it working in the end?
I could never get it to work.
I'll find you.
I did read about the comments in the press, but
yes.
it's not the same as listening to it live.
Oh no, I think they pinch him and didn't attribute it. Naughty. Yeah. Anyway, it basically said that it's all the government is spending so much money. They say $11 billion on Christchurch City. They've had to cut their cloth in Wellington and try and cut things. The council now needs. What's missing from this entire conversation is that the council is not talking about what it needs to cut internally. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to suggest, because I asked Christchurch Mayor Leanne Dalzell, any fat inside the council? She couldn't comment. I asked Dr. Carleen Edwards, what do you reckon? Any fat inside the council? I got some analogy about weight loss.
Yeah. No, look, we are going through looking operationally at what we can save. The Chief Executive is doing that, and we've asked that happens. But when you think about the biggest burden of the earthquake, it is actually the huge amounts of money being spent in the central city. In fact, the quantum of money that's been suggested we raise from selling off our assets will really only fund the expensive projects that were being proposed in the central city, the Metro Sports facility, the big rugby stadium, the gold plating of the central city streets, new libraries, etc. So, you know, really there is a choice there. There is a lot of money that's been spent, and I think that's one of the things I would encourage people to make submissions and think about what are the local things you want in your community and what are the things that you want to trade off with in regards to the central city. Now, it is complicated by the fact that we have this cost-sharing agreement, and I've personally always thought the problem with the blueprint was it was never clear how it was funded from the start. This is the reality of council now finally having to do an audited 10-year plan, that we start to see what those true costs are.
The trouble is, we still don't know what the ongoing operational costs will be for some of these projects.
No.
So therefore, it's all very well for the government to say that they're picking up the tab for the convention centre, but we still don't know A, the business case, and B, who will be paying for the operational expenses, largely of a facility that globally does not make money. Does that concern you?
Oh, absolutely, and I've been trying to get that information made available. The new bus interchange is going to open in 2 months' time, and we still don't know who's going to own it and operate it. You've got a number of things like the children's playground that we see in another announcement today that work's about to start. Absolutely no idea how much that's going to cost to maintain. But these are the sorts of things that people should be making submissions, and I really strongly emphasise that people need to think about the long term, because in the long term, if you sell off the things that make money, you really only look at rates going in one direction. And while the short term it's quite tempting to say, well, we can keep rates low by selling off a lot of things now, the trade-off is in the long run we'll have less money available to do the things that we want to do for future generations.
Yanni Hinton, a lot of people calling into the radio station over the last couple of weeks concerned about rates and all that kind of stuff. Now is the most important time, if they really want to have their say, is to make a submission, to read the report, make that submission, let your voice be heard. When can they do that, and how can they do that?
So the document itself will go out next week on the 17th of March. The consultation period will be open. I've managed to get extended for a week, so we'll go about to the 28th of April. That's when you need to put in a written submission. Once you've done that, you can tick the box to say you wish to be heard, and in May, Council will have oral submissions from people. So I encourage people to make the written submission, and it's always more powerful if you take the time to come in and talk directly to your councillors about what the priorities should be.
Totally agree. I know you guys are very accessible. We do appreciate that. Yanni Hinton, some big decisions to make. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you
for coming into the program. Well, the Christchurch City Council really does want to hear your views on the future plans for the city. They're big issues. $1.2 million of debt. What will the outcome be? What do you think? Well, as Yanni was saying, it could be rate increases, asset sales, and some services already planned to possibly get the chop. It's a very, very big decision we have ahead. Here's some vox pops on what you had to say.
It's being claimed as the best document yet showing the city's financial situation, and from next week people will get to respond to it. The City Council's 10-year long-term plan this time round is certainly unique. It's the first one residents have been able to comment on since 2009, before the earthquakes, and a lot has happened since then. The council's share of the rebuild bill and other insurance issues blew its budget, and only in the last 3 months did it discover a debt totalling of $1.2 billion. Since then, asset sales of more than $750 million and rate rises of more than 25% over 3 years have been tabled. And it's possible there'll be some other infrastructural cutbacks. But just what will be the right mix of hard cost savings and future needs? The plan outlines how the council will pay for everything it wants to do over the next 10 years, so now is the time to get it right. Mayor Leanne Dalzell says the consultation document is the starting point for the council and the community to get together and jointly define their priorities and vision for the future Christchurch. It wants to spend more than $10 billion over the next decade, just under half of it on capital works that includes rebuilding facilities and infrastructure. But is this what the city wants? Is the council balancing the right community facilities, investing the right amount into the rebuild, and will there be suitable buyers for stakes in its strategic assets? This is the people's turn to have their say.
So in a way, there's never been a more important time in the history of our city to make sure you do have your say. Well, that's CTV News for Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.